This is Tipping Point Radio. I'm Craig Merriweather, and you're listening to Garden of the Mystics. We all know on some level that it is important to love ourselves. But when people say that all you have to do is love yourself, it's kind of like telling a child in kindergarten that he or she has to solve a college physics equation. Like that bewildered child, we have no idea where to begin. We are standing in a place where we don't love ourselves and haven't for some time. We simply have no idea where to start and where to go from here. That's the first paragraph in the introduction to Teal Swan's book, Shadows Before Dawn, Finding the Light of Self-Love Through Your Darkest Times. A friend introduced me to this book, and after reading it and going through some of the exercises to help you cultivate self-love, I felt Teal was somebody I wanted to share with you on Tipping Point Radio. Her story is remarkable, and her journey to creating self-love in her own life is extraordinary. Before we start the interview, let me tell you a little bit about Teal. Teal is an internationally recognized spiritual leader and an influential new voice in the field of metaphysics. Teal survived years of physical, mental, and sexual abuse before escaping her abuser at the age of 19 and beginning her own process of recovery and transformation. Today she shares what she has learned with millions of people, teaching them how to find forgiveness, happiness, freedom, and self-love. Now here's my interview with Teal Swan. Hello, Teal. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, I'm excited about your book because I think this touches on a lot of, the main issue that I think plagues a lot of people, self-love and self-hate. And maybe there's a difference. Why don't we start there? Is there a difference between self-hate and self-love? I guess if you don't necessarily hate yourself, but that doesn't necessarily mean you love yourself.
Yeah, there's a huge difference. I think the majority of people who are actually walking the planet today are in various stages of self-hate, in fact. And it's because of the way that we were raised. As children, you are brought up and socialized in a way where you learn that certain aspects of you and yourself are acceptable while others are not. And because we're a social-based species, we then go about this arduous process of trying to suppress, deny, and disown and basically get rid of anything that's not acceptable because we have to be accepted in the group in order to survive. So when we go about that process of suppressing, rejecting, denying, and disowning aspects of our being, that is actually the birth of self-hate. We're looking at aspects of ourselves and saying, this is not okay about me. So even your, quote-unquote, healthiest member of society is in a state of self-hate. When we call it self-hate, in terms, all that means is it's become more of a conscious process than just subconsciously suppressing aspects of you that were seen as unacceptable to the group you grew up in. It's almost like you're looking at yourself with an attitude of, and consciously looking at yourself with an attitude of, I'm just worth nothing. Can't stand me. Yeah.
Yeah, and you see yourself as not acceptable.
Yes.
Yeah. And this, of course, leads to self-sabotage. It leads to that victim mentality, and it just becomes this cycle.
You know what's ironic, though, is I see people who are self-hating as being even closer to self-love than people who are just in your average state of minor self-hate but not consciously aware of it, because they say, oh, I am acceptable, but what they're not getting is the acceptable version of themselves is a highly sculpted, shall we say, persona, which they've designed in order to be acceptable to the group. Whereas somebody who's completely in a space of self-hate is going to get to the point where they are in enough pain that they're going to have to find genuine self-love. So that's some good news for the hardcore self-haters out there.
Yeah, well, and you just hit that rock bottom and you say, I've had enough of feeling like this. I'm ready to do something else. But again, it's not an easy road to leave that self-hatred behind. What do you suggest, or if somebody's listening to this, because I'll probably title it something to the effect of ending self-hate, so somebody sees that, listens to this, and what would you suggest the first steps would be if they've had enough?
Well, the first step for somebody who's in that low of a frequency is that we've got to understand, essentially, is that the entire personality spectrum of a genuine self-hater is set up to not accept love. There's something wrong and bad about accepting love and receiving. And so you can almost think of yourself like a fortress with this moat or castle walls that are really high and hard to climb. So what we have to do is find a backdoor entrance to the castle, because, I mean, if you're a self-hater, sitting in front of the mirror and repeating affirmations isn't going to do anything except for make you aware of how much you do hate yourself, in fact.
Yeah.
So what we got to do is we got to trick our body. And one of my favorite ways to do this, I actually titled it in my book, The Trojan Horse Effect, is that you take a glass of water and you focus love, but about something else, into that water. So let's say if you're a hardcore self-hater, you may completely hate yourself, but you may love your pet cat. And you can feel that sensation of loving or feeling appreciation for your cat when it's cute, when it's cuddly, when he's like curled up in the sun, or whatever image you want to come up with. You can project the love you feel towards your cat or some external thing into that water, and then you drink the water. So you're taking that frequency, that high frequency love energy, into you. But
Yeah.
you didn't have to consciously love yourself in order to do that. That's going to be step one.
Well, and that's a really interesting premise, and it may sound a bit woo-woo to some people, but there's a wonderful book, The Hidden Messages in Water, by Dr. Emoto, Emoto, which kind of explains exactly what you're talking about and why it works and how it works. You know, and that's a kind of interesting idea about this. You almost have to trick yourself. I guess that's the wrong word. Like you said, backdoor Trojan horse thing. You're sneaking love into your life because you have this consciousness of, feeling you're not good enough.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's what I really liked about your book, is it's part autobiography, but then a good chunk of it is just all these exercises on how to cultivate self-love. And I think some of the wonderful ones that I like, that I'm trying to do a daily practice of, one of the first ones you discuss is discover that you are deserving. And that's a hard one to deal with when you feel that you're not deserving.
Oh, yeah, hugely. But I love to have people, when they're in that phase of I don't deserve anything, to try to find the point at which they lost that deserving. Because it's pretty easy to get people to look at a tiny baby or a small child and be like, oh, that child deserves love and deserves all these other things. But then my question is, like, where is the arbitrary line in the sand after which point you didn't deserve those things? And what you find as a person who's in a state of self-hate is you can't actually find that line. You can't do it. You can't find an offense that you did that was big enough that you suddenly lost that deserving. And that's a really important thing for us to become aware of if we need to develop deserving, or that sense of, if I want to ask for it, then that's something that should come to me instead of something that should be withheld according to some sort of an external judger.
Right. Well, I think it's the internal judger that's the worst, because if you get to that point, the self-love is being blocked by shame and guilt and self-anger.
Oh, yeah, but what we have to get about those states is that we develop those states actually to protect ourselves. So this is a real big deal, I think, for people who are in a state of self-hate to realize, or who don't think they deserve, or who are blaming and who are absorbed in shame, is that shame and self-blame and these things are actually self-regulatory behaviors. They are designed to keep you from getting in trouble by other people. So it's almost like when you were younger, you didn't know what right was and what wrong was. And if you had parents that weren't really good at teaching you those things in ways that weren't threatening to your system, then you essentially developed a way to avoid their criticism by criticizing the crap out of yourself so that nobody else got a chance to do so. You became the internal moderator so that there wouldn't have to be an external police.
Yeah, it's kind of set yourself up because the hurt's coming, so just kind of hurt yourself first.
Oh yeah, and it works.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
It works especially well with parents who are like, well, I guess if you're not feeling good already, then I can be nice.
Yeah, and it goes into a lot of self-pity, and that's a great way to grab some attention if you're not getting the love. And you may be in a household where there's not a whole lot of love flowing, and this is a great way to get the attention if you're hurt, either emotionally or physically, and you get some of that attention that you're craving.
Oh, totally. See, and what makes me really sad is that in our self-help field or spiritual field or healing field, whatever you want to call it, there's been a lot of I guess, negative stigma around the idea of needing attention. So it's the minute you say, oh, somebody needs attention, it almost makes that desire invalid. When the reality is we all need and crave and want attention. Every child needs that, every adult needs that. And so it's a very valid need that we're trying to get met. And in a lot of families, the only acceptable way to get those particular needs met is if something's really wrong with you. So then there becomes the subconscious motivation to always have something be wrong because it's the only time you deserve human connection.
Well, and it also, there's a stigma of, yes, babies and little children need attention, and you're a teenager, you're a young adult, you're a middle-aged adult, you shouldn't need that anymore.
Yeah, which is complete BS.
Yeah, yeah, and that's also a cultural thing too. It's like, well, grow up, get over it, and move on with your life because you're not a baby or you're not a little kid anymore. And it's we still need all that attention, not only just physical attention and loving touch, but also the kind words. But we, as a maybe culture or society, or just the way our families grew up, we just don't understand that and don't offer it to each other.
That's true, which is what I'm hoping is changing within society, because I can tell you for 100% that people who are saying that to you are not capable of living up to those same standards either. Those are the ones that are like, drowning themselves with an alcohol bottle and hoping that it's different than the milk bottle that a 2-year-old has, but it's not. It's just a different poison.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, one of the other tools that you mentioned in your book is you titled the chapter "The Most Important Decision That You Will Ever Make," and I thought this one was pretty amazing, because what this is all coming down to really is self-responsibility. And the chapter basically comes down to, you need to decide that you deserve or are able to be happy. And that's a real kind of hard one for a lot of people, because, well, they haven't achieved this or that. Once they get out of high school, they'll be happy. Once they get the college degree, they'll be happy. Buy the house, get married, have kids graduate. It's always something else. They'll be happy. And an external thing, and you have to get to that point where the inside of you is saying, enough, I've just decided I'm going to be happy, and because for no other reason, just because to do it.
Oh, yeah. That sounds really difficult for people to understand, because, like, if that was as easy as it is to just decide I'm going to be happy today, we would have all done it by now, let's be honest. Yeah. So what it really comes down to is that when I was basically left with no answer as to how to love yourself, I had to go around and really start trying to figure out the difference between people who love themselves and people who didn't. And the number one key thing that I realized in all of these years of studying these people, essentially, was that the people who love themselves prioritize their happiness in the moment more than anything else. Like, over everything. And, I mean, from a standpoint of a self-hater, albeit a really quote-unquote selfless self-hater, I was like, there is no way in hell that these people can be this freaking selfish. Like, I just don't understand. But they were, and it was without exception. The people who love themselves were the ones who would say, right now in this very moment, I either get to choose between instant gratification of doing what I want to do right now, or I don't really want to do this, fill in the blank, like clean the house. And they would always choose to do whatever felt best to them in the moment. So one day that would look like not cleaning the house. The next day that would look like cleaning the house. But it was like they were playing everything according to how they felt in this moment. And I started to look at that. At first I had real adverse reaction to it, but when I really started to look at that, I was like, self-haters, they will always put the carrot in the future, and they will never reach that carrot, and it becomes a life of perpetual misery. So if you can switch that up, essentially, what happens is, if in each moment you're prioritizing what feels best, what feels best, what feels best, what feels best, the chain of those what feels best moments actually creates a good feeling life. And so the decision to be happy or to prioritize how you feel above everything else is the most self-loving decision we will ever make.
Mm-hmm. Well, I want to read you a sentence from your book. It says, one of our greatest sources of unhappiness is the belief that things should be different than how they are or were. And for people who maybe have, some difficulties in their past, or maybe going through difficulties now, that's a hard belief to get rid of. That you think things should be different. You deserve better than this, and it's not happening.
Oh yeah, it's by far one of the most difficult things. I would literally say that the majority, not even the majority, all suffering on the planet boils down to the idea that something shouldn't be that is, or something should be that isn't. So if we can, and it's not even, I'm not even asking people to like, lie to themselves and to be like, oh, this should definitely be happening because it feels good. What I'm saying is, if we can change our perception so that we're looking at events that are occurring in our life through the lens of this should be occurring, there is a huge amount of distress that leaves the table. Then it's about embracing the situation and whatever it brings, both negatives and positives, as opposed to resisting the thing that is already painful. See, like the pain in and of itself is bad, but what creates suffering is resistance to the pain.
Right.
It's like resistance on top of pain. You've got a world of hurt, is what you've got.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, it's that whole Aikido mentality of just letting the energy flow. But if you're going to stand in front of somebody's, blow that's coming at you, that's going to hurt. That's going to hurt pretty bad.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, that actually runs into another quote from your book that I really, really like. You write, "The road from self-hate to self-love is meant to be a road of ease, but only if we are brave enough to let it be easy." And I kind of goes into what we were just saying, but it doesn't seem like that's an easy thing to deal with or do.
Yes, well, I mean, that's the thing, is because we make it complicated. When we say something's not easy, what we're doing is we're standing at the base of a staircase, looking at the top of the staircase, and we feel like we are paralyzed. And so the journey from there to there seems incredibly arduous. Mm-hmm. The path of ease is, can you put one foot on the next stair that's in front of your face? If you can do that, then that is a path of ease. So the path of ease is not let's get over self-hate and be self-loving. That even sounds like too much to chew for me. It's almost like, to let it be a path of ease, you do what feels best in this moment, and that's it. And so if, like, applying tools, you don't have to apply every single one of them. In fact, one of the techniques I suggest for using the book is to, let's say, do an old-fashioned sort of woo-woo practice of allowing the book to fall open to whatever page, and then you read it, and if there's any exercise on that particular page, you do it that day, and then maybe abandon it tomorrow if you don't want to.
Yeah. Well, since you just mentioned a book, this might be a good opportunity to let everybody know the title of the book is Shadows Before Dawn, Finding the Light of Self-Love Through Your Darkest Times. You can ask for it at your local bookstore, or, of course, Amazon and Barnes & Noble. And Teal, best place to find more information about you is tealswan.com, I'm assuming.
Yes.
And, of course, from there you can find her on Facebook and Twitter. But also what I really have been enjoying is the videos. You have your video channel on YouTube, so if you just go to YouTube and type in Teal Swan, you'll find her channel. But you make some great videos, your Ask Teal series, and so you really engage a lot with your listener base, your fan base. It's just not a book and then you kind of go undercover. You're really out there. You got your blog, you're doing a lot of Facebook, a lot of Twitter, and you're doing these videos. So you're reaching out and you're really out there helping people.
Oh, yeah. That's for sure. Yeah. I don't even know where I live anymore. I'm traveling so much at this point.
Well, and you're doing workshops, too. You're not speaking engagements, but also workshops as well, right?
Yeah, well, the thing is I love interaction. And I feel like there's a lot of, let's say these kind of locks, like self-hate kind of functions within the personality spectrum like a lock. And a lot of these locks, they get undone through interaction. So obviously I like to provide people with a lot of information, but it's also super beneficial in these workshops that I can work one-on-one with people, but I work with them one-on-one on stage so everyone else can apply themselves to the process. But it's kind of like a chess game with a subconscious mind, but in this chess game, if I manage to win that chess game, the other person has just set themselves completely free of whatever limiting belief they have or like life problem that they have. And I absolutely love it. I love that interaction. I love the breakthrough. So it's become like I feel like I'm mining for gold, basically.
Right. Well, and it's great to hear other people's stories and see them come to those realizations that sometimes they just need to look at it just another way, and they get it. one of my favorite chapters or exercises that you have in your book is about self-worth. And again, I'm going to read another sentence from your book. Lack of self-worth begins with the idea that we are not good enough exactly as we are, and therefore we can't be loved exactly as we are. And I think, that could just, man, if you could just get that one idea right there, that solves most of your problems.
Yes.
Yeah.
If it was that easy, I would love that.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, and that's the thing. This isn't like you said before. If it was easy, most everybody would be doing it. But we've been programmed for 10, 20, 30, 40 years on how not to love ourselves, and there's this idea that maybe loving yourself is a bit selfish.
Oh gosh, that one drives me the most crazy. In fact, I have an entire chapter on that, don't I? Or at least a section within the chapter. Yeah, I remember in the book itself, I wrote about that sort of misconception that there's something about self-love that is self-centered. But here's the thing: most of us who are coming at this sort of let's call it a social approach of I hate myself. If you come at a social group with that attitude of I don't like myself, let me put myself down, we're suddenly called humble. And so it's a celebrated thing within our society and our structure, especially for women, by the way, to basically self-hate. And so, I mean, the minute you say something nice about yourself, it's considered boasting, and suddenly you're being narcissistic. So we're kind of caught in this crux where self-hate is seen as virtuous and self-love is seen as, like you just said, self-centered, selfish. But the thing is that if you don't have any love in your being, you're not going to have anything to give. You literally will not. That is an absolute of your existence. Mm-hmm. So unless you're receiving in some way, you're never going to love someone else. You're just going to design everything you do to try to basically suck any kind of attention, affection out of other people that you possibly can do. And so that is the most profoundly self-centered action you could take, essentially, is to not be self-loving.
Yeah, well, it's just what's in the core of your heart. And if you hate yourself and you're angry at yourself and you're full of shame and guilt, you really can't say you love somebody else. I mean, I guess you can, and maybe you have feelings of puppy love or infatuation, things like that. But how can you truly deeply love somebody when your own heart is filled with hate for yourself?
Yep.
So some of the stuff you have on your YouTube channel is really fun to watch. They're like these, I don't know, 15, 20-minute blog post videos that you do, and love the animation at the beginning of them. I love that. One of the ones that came out fairly recently was titled Failing at Spirituality.
Uh-huh. Ooh, I loved that one.
Yeah, and the basic premise of this post that you did, this video you did, was unless you're doing everything perfectly, you're doing something wrong. Or if your life is not perfect, you must be doing something wrong. And when you see this not just in the kind of spiritual circles we might run in, but in also other places. If you're getting a divorce or you have cancer, it's like, well, you must have pissed God off.
Yep.
And therefore, if you get your crap together, then maybe you wouldn't be sick.
Yeah.
And it's just not the way it works.
Yeah, I feel like the amount of pressure we put on ourselves and each other, regardless of whether we are spiritual or aren't spiritual, is at this point so intense. It's amazing somebody leaves the house.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, but in that video, my whole entire point was to just blow the lid off of this sort of perfectionism that we've got going. And to unveil the fact that nobody's doing it correctly. Absolutely nobody. Even the people who are supposed to be teaching how to do it perfectly aren't doing it perfectly. And if they are saying that they're doing it perfectly, they're lying to you. So
Yeah. And the idea that and I guess it's, and you probably have encountered this, is that our spiritual teachers and our mentors, we put them on a pedestal and they have to be perfect. And when you find out that they, sometimes sitting in front of the TV and eat a pint of Ben and Jerry's, it's like, well, that's not very spiritual, and why am I listening to this person? Mm-hmm. And that's what I find so refreshing about the way you come across within your blogs and your writings is like you open yourself up, and this is, you say, this is a real deal. And there's so many, and I hope this doesn't sound judgmental, but so many people who feel like they have to put that curtain up and say, well, here's my teachings, and this is how it goes, but maybe their life isn't so great behind the curtain.
Totally. That is exactly what I've come here to demolish, is the velvet curtain that exists between spiritual practitioners and spiritual teachers.
Yeah. And again, you get a lot of flack for it.
Oh, yeah, I do. Trust me. Some days I'm literally on my bed going, why did I do this? This is a stupid decision. Maybe they're all right.
Maybe they're all right. Yeah, well, it's so easy now with, I don't get a lot of it, but every now and then comment on YouTube or Facebook or whatever, and it's just like, really? Do you have nothing else to do with your time but specifically go out there and try to hurt somebody else or destroy somebody else's? And you can hide behind your anonymous Facebook name or YouTube name or whatever, and try to take down somebody who's being authentic and saying, this is the real me. And it's, and again, maybe that's where a lot of the self-hate comes out, is attacking other people.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. You just find...
An unhealthy ego is always going to lash out in a state of defense where it wants to create others and self. It's going to do the versus thing. So in the minute that the ego that's in a state of, let's say, inflammation, the minute that it begins to target something as less than, it gets to be greater than. So that's why there are so many people on the internet today that are essentially going out there and attacking other people. It's because in that moment they get to be justified, in that moment they get to be right, and in that moment they get to be the good guy.
Yeah. And it's easy, you're hiding behind a computer screen, and you don't have to really engage after that. You can leave your little comment bombs all over the place and then walk away and have a nice day. And
Yep.
don't realize the destruction you're doing to other people. Unless you have that healthy self-image and self-love for yourself, you just, it is what it is. But, people do it because, they've been hurt themselves that way, and it does hurt.
Yeah. Yeah, it does.
Yeah. What is a great way, since you're trying to be authentic to everybody, how do you develop an authentic self-worth for yourself and, allow other people to see that?
I haven't actually been able in my own life to develop a sense of self-worth by trying to go after self-worth directly. What I've had to do is realize that anytime my self-worth is challenged, it's in fact the ego state, the separate self that's being threatened. And so instead of run away or take action as a result of that threat, I sit with that feeling of being threatened. I sit with the idea of being worthless instead of trying to find my worth. And what will happen is this very odd thing where you sort of drop through the basement of that really powerless state into a kind of being that is not attached to the idea of self at all. So it's not like... And it's a weird thing when you become not attached to the sense of self, and there's not that like, oh, I have to be this way or I have to be that way, then naturally you can start to see the value in yourself with an attitude of love rather than attachment, and you can see the things that most people would consider a flaw about you, but not with an attitude of self-condemnation. So it's almost like an accurate but non-biased appraisal of the self that starts to develop.
Yeah. Well, part of the issue I think people find themselves in is that they feel not in control of their circumstances. And and therefore they think maybe God is against them, or they've done something wrong to warrant these circumstances in their life, whether it's abuse or loss of a job or spouse or what have you, or illness. And they think, well, if I'm this sick or my past is that bad, then maybe I deserve it because, if God was loving, he wouldn't have set me up like this.
Oh yeah, totally. In fact, I did 2 videos on that very subject. The first was called "What to Do When I Feel Like God Is Against Me." The second was "What to Do When I Have No Control," because it's such a big issue within, I guess, most of our minds. But the one thing that we have to also understand about that state is anytime we move into self-blame or feeling like we deserve something, that's actually an action, a thought-based action that we are taking in order to gain control again. And now I know this is going to be a little bit hard to understand, but I'd like to stretch people's minds here when I say this. The most difficult thing to take away from somebody who's in a victim role, regardless of whether it's somebody who's been sexually abused or, some other type of, let's say, heinous crime has been acted against them. The hardest thing to do in therapy is to get them to a space where they realize that they didn't deserve it. Because that deserving is the only thing that separates them from being a genuine victim or being able to latch on to a reason. So, like, if I invited a situation in, it means that I had some control over it. But if I didn't invite it in, I have no control over it, and that's actually scarier. So we have to see that we're doing that kind of control technique even when we're going to this place of self-blame.
Right. And do you find that in talking to others that it's easy to come to a realization that maybe I don't know how to say this, but that even with the tragedy of their life, that there is still love out there, and they are loved, and that God is
No.
loving to them? No.
No, I don't even bother with that, in fact, because the reality is if you're in a low enough state and somebody comes in and says, look, I know you're suffering right now, but God loves you. The only thing you feel like doing is taking a 2x4 to their face. Yeah. So basically, when we're in a low vibration like that, it's really like the school of hard knocks. The reality is you sit in front of the person and you say, you're right. You know what? You have absolutely every reason to feel this way. I can't prove to you that God loves you, that God doesn't hate you. I can't even prove to you there is one. But what I can say is you get to decide whether to live or die. Like right now, you get to decide that. All people get to decide that. And if you decide you want to live, then you literally can only do the best you can with what you have from where you are. Mm-hmm. So at this moment, what does that mean? It means if the only thing you have access to is a thought that feels better or worse, choose a better thought. If the only thing you have access to is an action that feels better, or worse, choose the better action. And you just keep incrementally taking steps in that direction. And without knowing where it's going to lead you, just keep going in the direction. Because that's your only option right now.
Right. Yeah, that's brilliant. You kind of started off your healing process with that very thing, just starting with the water. Little things like that. And then you acclimate to that, and you add one more thing. And that's what's nice about your book. Is these exercises. You don't have to do all, how many exercises? 30 exercises in the first week. Mm-hmm. You can try one for a week or one for a month, or skip around and whatever works for you. And they're all relatively, I wouldn't say they're easy to do because we're talking about loving yourself, and that might be hard for people. But they're not complicated exercises to engage in. And that's what I love about the book you wrote. And half, if not more than half, the book is exercises in allowing people to start the cultivating process of self-love. So
because I see self-love as something which will evolve naturally as the byproduct of previous steps. Mm-hmm. Not as a step in and of itself. And that is the major difference, I guess, between me and a lot of people with their approach to self-love. A lot of people treat self-love like it's an entire step. They'll be like, just love yourself.
Yeah.
Like, that's never worked for me. So what I have noticed working for myself as well as other people is do this activity or this action or practice this thought or this way of looking at the world, and self-love will literally naturally just happen as a result of it. Quit thinking about self-love in general,
Yeah, well, you just don't go out and win the Boston Marathon. There's a whole lot of steps, a whole lot of...
Oh, come on, it's just as easy as go run the race.
Go run the race. Just do it. And if you don't win it the first time, you're a failure.
I know. Isn't that great?
Yeah, isn't that great? That is great. That's a wonderful thing. Teal, I thank you so much. We're kind of up on the clock, and I appreciate your time and your patience with this whole process. And everybody, tealswan.com is the place to go. and from there you can find her on Facebook and Twitter. And I highly recommend going to YouTube and just finding her YouTube channel, because there's just hours and hours and hours. Each video is like 15, 20 minutes, but there's just so much great stuff there. And Teal, I appreciate your bravery and courage in the way you're interacting with everybody, because I know there are probably rough days out there. And but I appreciate it, because it's refreshing, and I just love what you had to say. A lot of interviews I get from publishers send me information, or here's the new books coming out and things like this. But a friend of mine recommended your book, and I was going through some stuff, and immediately just went and bought it. And after going through it and watching all your stuff, I said, "This is somebody I need to talk with." And so I appreciate your time, and man, more power to you.
Thank you so much. That support actually means a hell of a lot. So thank you.